welcome to Oral Sessions. Finally, we get Shayna Baszler on. Oh my God.
I'm surprised it happened so soon.
Me too. I mean, I feel like, you were at the very tippy top of my request list when I was like, hey, we're starting the show. We need to start getting as many people on as we can that are legitimate human beings, you being one of them.
Yes.
Here we are. And you are very nice that you repost the show and stuff.
It's I'm not lying.
Listener.
That's not, yeah. I obviously on Mondays now I have a commute now that we're in St. Petersburg. So I listen to it every Monday. I know it's a little late because it comes out before that, but I save it.
Get it in when you can.
Yeah. I save it so that I can, I started at first listening to it during my stupid cardio workouts, but then I need more motivation.
Yeah. No, I get that.
So I changed it to my morning commute.
What do you listen to now? What's your, I see you posting all of your metal music for working out. Is that what you mostly stick to?
So if I'm lifting heavy, then it's more metal. If I'm doing cardio, I like something a little more groovy that I can bop to. Sometimes a little more hip hop. I'm into Soul Crate and Wu-Tang and stuff that's you can
you can get into it. I've been on a big Wu-Tang kick lately. I've been way into it, trying to get my child to know about good music before she crawls out of the womb. But yeah, I've been on a bit. I just recently went down this whole rabbit hole of I went Wu-Tang, and then I went into De La Soul, and then that led me into a bunch of Lauryn Hill, into the Fugees. It's been quite a ride.
You check out Soul Crate. They're from my hometown. And they're that vein of music.
Who else is from your hometown? I was looking up trying to find. I feel like there's other famous people from your hometown. Brock is from your hometown, right?
Not my hometown, but really close by, South Dakota.
Yeah.
And South Dakota is a bunch of little towns all spread out. So when one person is from South Dakota, everyone claims them.
Oh, I think that exists kind of everywhere. I say I'm from Toronto. I'm not from Toronto, but they say Drake's from Toronto. Maybe he did grow up I think he grew up in a town, the little rich town outside of Toronto. Yeah. Drake's never had a hard time in his life. Let me just make that very clear. He's born and bred from the best of them, but good for him. Get after it. So here's an unfortunate thing is that I left WWE at what would have been the brink of our best friendship.
Yeah, we talked about that.
And I left.
Yeah. Yeah.
We really could have had a time. We still can through distance and through this show.
We kind of do. We're when you were first around, and I'm okay, she swears as much as I do. That's cool. Whiskey,
now I can do it on TV
smoke.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
All of it. Okay. What whiskeys are you into right now?
So I always have, always on the shelf, I have the Nika coffee grain, just as it's the Sprite of whiskeys. I don't know that anyone's going to say it's their favorite, but everyone will drink it and like it just fine.
Okay.
So especially
like a Jack Daniels almost.
Yeah, but fancier.
Okay. Oh my God. Do not let John hear you say that. He will die. He gets so offended by that because he's straight up just Jack Daniels, and anything outside of that, he tries to participate. And it's actually a funny story, side story. But when him and I first started dating, so I'm living in New York, he's in Vegas. He would come visit me. I'm like, oh, I've got this great idea. I'm going to take him to a whiskey bar. Worst idea.
Oh
ever.
no.
It was this too cool spot. And he went in and ordered a Jack, and the guy was appalled that he ordered a Jack Daniels, and he brought him this clear rubbing alcohol whiskey, and John was just trying to choke it down. It was a huge fail.
Hilarious.
Yeah, he was not into it.
What does he think about Josh's whiskey? Did he try Josh's whiskey?
He likes Josh's whiskey, but he needs to have Josh's whiskey after having several other whiskeys. It can't be his first. He needs to ease into it a bit because it's a punch in the face.
Pretty strong, yeah. Yeah.
It's gnarly. What would you ever do your own whiskey? I feel like you need to get on that bandwagon.
I would. I think before that because I'm really into like craft beer.
Oh, okay.
Like a lot. And like I drink beer like people drink wine. Like I'm like,
God, I love beer.
The color and the you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it would pair well with this food. Like I'm a beer snob. I'm not even ashamed to say it. But so I think like I would do that first. But obviously with Josh and like he's like a second father to me, so I think it's not so outlandish that I would delve into the whiskey world eventually.
Yeah, dabble a little bit. Okay, so if you were going to make your own beer, what would be like the notes that you want?
I think I'd go with like a porter or like a bock of some sort. That's not like
What's a
like
bock?
it's a darker colored
Okay.
kind of beer, but it's like everybody that gets into craft beer does IPAs. That or everybody that says they're into craft beer is like, yeah, I like a good IPA, but like and IPAs are great, but there's so much more than that. So I feel like I wouldn't do an IPA just because that's what everybody that does
everyone's
beer
already doing
does.
it.
Yeah, so I think I'd want something like porters and bocks are not like stouts. So stout is like a big thick
yeah, it's like a milkshake.
Yeah, it's like your Guinness is a stout, for example.
I like Guinness by the half pint. I don't need a full pint. I want a half of it.
I like Guinness with a whiskey dropped in it, but that's a whole other thing.
That's a doozy. That'll take you down a real trip. I mean, you want to have a good St. Patrick's Day? Yeah. That's the way. Oh, you'll be puking 100%.
Yeah. But I think I'd go along those lines of like a caramel type of like, or maybe coffee, depending on which way I want to go flavor wise. But I think like a darker color that's not so dark that people are like, I can't drink dark beers. Like something like that.
People get very freaked out by dark beers.
Yeah. Yeah. When really it's little the bitches. IPAs that people, like if I was going to introduce someone to beer, if someone was like, I don't really like beer, I'd be like, you just haven't had the right kind. I would introduce them to IPAs last.
I agree because I'm not a huge IPA person. Like I am a bit of like a weenie when it comes to beer. Like I will love, like I'll sit back and throw back 100 Miller Lights. But that's mostly for their caloric intake, like 98 calories. Keep those coming. But I've been dabbling into the non-alcoholic beers so that I feel like I'm participating right now. And there's actually some good ones. There's some decent ones. Like John's been buying a few of them, but there's an IPNA one that he gets. And then there's like Suntory does a good one. Heineken has a good one. I mean, these aren't ranking on anybody's lists by any means, but they're getting me through of like, I'll just have one of these.
I would have to do that if I had to, stop. I would definitely have to fool myself. There's days where I'm so sore. The only way I get through the week is because I'm like, oh man, beer day's coming. If I could just make it to Tuesday, then yeah.
Tuesday's booze day, baby.
Yeah, yes.
Wait, what day's? Oh, today's Thursday. Okay, so we've missed it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Fair enough.
That's why I'm like the energy drink. You know what I mean? Like.
Hey, you got to pick and choose your days. I respect that. Here's a big question. When I left WWE, so for people that don't know, which you wouldn't know, but we have traveling tour cases that keep all of our stuff in it. And you degenerates turned my drawer into a booze drawer.
Yes.
Yes. Is there still booze rattling around in that road case?
Well, so now we have more girls on the roster, so we had to give them a drawer. But I do have whiskey, and funny enough, it is Jack Daniel's in my drawer.
Perfect.
Just because, like, you can't be caught unawares when it's like WrestleMania and you want to have a drink afterwards. Yes. Or like, yeah.
There's nothing better than that, like, post-show cheers in the locker room. Yeah. It's the best. So you mentioned Josh Barnett, which you guys can go back and listen to the past episode with Josh Barnett. He was actually my very first person I interviewed for this show, which was very cool. He's such a good dude. How did you get hooked up with Josh? Like, how did that relationship first start? So way, way back when I first started fighting, and not just women's MMA, but MMA itself was really small and niche still. It's like
he has always been very outspokenly in support of women's MMA, which was really an anomaly at the time. You know what I mean? Because like women's MMA and women's, especially in combat sports, is always like a little bit behind on the acceptance scale. And so MMA itself
women's sports
was already,
in general is like that. It's always behind. Yeah.
And I think like to have a prominent name at the time, he's like fighting in Pride and he's Pancrase champion and he's this big name. And to be so outspoken in his interviews about women's MMA and stuff. And it's funny because like being a fighter, maybe people understand this, being in the fight world, I'm not like marking out about other fighters. I am one. You know what I mean? Like it's obviously I have, obviously I'm like, oh man, it's Josh Barnett, like inside, but I'm not gonna be like, hey, can I get a picture? And like usually. But I had a fight in Costa Rica, and the event was awesome. The ring was like on a beach, like I could have jumped off the top turnbuckle into the ocean. They had this event, the original on the Fight beach.
Island.
Yeah, it was like Bodog fights, and I was on the beach, and I had a fight. And at the time, I fought a girl who was like in the argument for like number 1 and 2 in the world.
Damn.
Had a really good fight. She poked me in the eye. She'll laugh. We're friends. No! We're friends now. We're friends now, and that's a long-standing joke. But I ended up losing, and on my way out of the ring, like I just lost what at the time was like the biggest fight in my career. And I'm on my way out of the ring to go to the back, and I pass him. He was ringside, Josh. He's ringside, and I pass him, and I go, Josh, I wanted to say, like, thank you for always supporting women's MMA. Can I get a picture with you before we leave this island? And he was like, yeah, hit me up. And then it was like later at the after party that he was like, hey, you want to get that picture now? And we were just talking, and I started doing magic tricks and traded contact info. So then fast forward a few months, I had a fight booked in California, and I knew that's where he was. So I emailed him asking, not even asking for his help, but just asking if we could use his gym, his facilities to like get workouts in and stuff while I went out there. And he just kind of like, yeah, and if you need a hand wrap guy, I learned from Stitch, and if you need a corner, I can do that too. I was like, okay, cool. And we went out there, and he just kind of like took over my training camp. He like ran my training, and and then I just was doing that for every fight until I finally moved out there. And
How is it when you switch to training with somebody like Josh? Because it seems grueling.
Yeah, it's not. You know, he doesn't baby anyone.
No.
And he's a guy that and you having met him will laugh at this, but he doesn't give his compliments easily. So he's not he's not a guy that's going to tell you good job every day, but man, when he tells you good job, you feel good about it. But he's a hard ass for sure. And I think just having someone as experienced as him, and at a time, and it's still this way, where the sport is very like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu heavy. He was like the guy waving the catch wrestling flag, and kind of like, he's the one that opened my eyes to the fact that like catch wrestling and pro wrestling and MMA all have the same shared history.
Sure.
And I mean, obviously now with what I'm doing, it opened an entire different world to me.
100%.
Than the way I'd been looking at it before.
I mean, I feel like blood sport is something that you would absolutely crush in. I wish that you could do that. I know obviously because of contractual obligations and all that, but that seems like something that would be so up your alley. Seemed like you were gonna maybe get an opportunity-ish when we had the Raw Underground, and then that didn't really live very long, unfortunately. But I was like, I actually thought when they started doing Raw Underground, I was like, this has got to be for Shayna specifically.
I think that's such a obviously with my martial upbringing and everything, like with Josh and Billy Robinson, all that is through that kind of UWF style. And that's what Bloodsport and Raw Underground was. I think the difficult part is that, and I'm just speculating, I'm not speaking for anyone, but just knowing how I trained for that style of professional wrestling, I don't think you can grab just any pro wrestler nowadays and just throw them into this and they know how to do it and make it look the way it's supposed to look. So I think they were finding it started kind of getting to be like, okay, it's starting to look a lot like what we have anyway.
Right.
So I think it's and I think, you know,
just
Josh,
shoot fights, baby. Just have some
yeah,
shoot fights down
well,
there.
I think Josh is kind of understanding it to be this way, where it's not like, this isn't like, oh, let's grab a bunch of MMA fighters and do these like worked fights. It's not that. And it's also not, let's grab a bunch of pro wrestlers and have them do these shoot matches. You have to find this like balance of people that have been trained a certain way.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's going to be slow to build up the talent pool, but I think if you do it right, it's better in the long run.
Oh my God, absolutely. And you're just seeing it. I mean, seeing John participate in it, it's definitely like a thing that like lights him up. He gets so excited to go like be a part of all that. And the training's different for it and all that stuff. But it is such a cool product. It's really, really fun to watch. How was it for you? I mean, having such an MMA background, when you started to transition into pro wrestling, I mean, when did that kind of light bulb go off that you're like, I want to go do this now?
So I had a fight against Amanda Nunes, and I got a partial tear in my ACL in that fight. And thankfully I didn't require surgery, but I had to stay off it for a while and rehab and stuff. But just the way the UFC was at the time, we kind of understood, like, I don't think people realize this about fighters. You don't like have a schedule of when you're going to fight. They just call you and they're like, hey, we have an event in May, you want to fight? So it could be 2 months till you fight. It could be a year until you fight next. So that's already
scary, especially when you're not if you're not making a ton of money and you're working at like similar to what I imagine it's like on the indies, right? It's like you kind of scratch and claw for whatever you can get.
Yes, exactly. And I think that knowing I was going to be sidelined with this injury anyway, and then on top of that, I'd be thrown at the back of the line. We just didn't know when I would be fighting next. And I think I was at a stage in my career where I had fought, you know, for like 16 years. And this is gonna cause all kinds of people, I bet, to comment or something. But
let's fire
I think
like
the popularity of MMA and the most visible part of my career being on this like tail side of my career made me kind of get jaded and despise MMA. So what started happening is I had a couple of fights where I got in there and I just didn't care to work as hard as I would need to win. If that, I can't explain it. I remember
once your heart's not in it, that's
I
just
happen,
didn't, you know?
And that's the truth. I just didn't love it. I fell out of love with it, and I can sit and point to a bunch of different reasons why and all this. And I'm not making excuses by any means, and I'm not ashamed of losing to like Amanda Nunes, obviously. But like I didn't love it. It was work. And I think that Josh was seeing that. He's a lot more experienced than me, and I think he recognized it, and he was like, "Hey, why don't we see if the UFC will let you do some pro wrestling?" And they immediately said no. So it was like, okay, well, let's just, so the option was like, let's just retire. So if you ever decide you want to unretire, you could just fight again.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. So that's what happened. I started doing wrestling, and I just started, I don't know. I fell in love with it. It's what caused me to find my love of MMA again. I did a whole thing in Japan where I lived there, you know, the pro wrestler thing where I like went and stayed and lived in Japan and toured around. At the same time, I took an MMA fight.
Where were you wrestling when you were in Japan?
All over. I was staying in Tokyo with Stardom.
Yeah.
But we would travel every week all over Japan. It was awesome. Yeah. But I was training at the UWF Snake Pit, which is the gym that Billy started when he was in Japan. And it was this crazy. I remember my first day in there, and I'm lacing up my shoes, and I'm just like, holy crap. Like Billy and Lou Thez were on this floor, like throwing each other around. I had this weird, like, I don't know, it was almost like spiritual, like, am I doing what I'm meant to do? Like, this is what they did. They fought and they wrestled all at the same time. So, I don't know. took a fight just to kind of, because I needed to for, I guess, a coming of age sort of thing. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I remember, so I ended up losing that one to a decision. I didn't cut weight because I had to. I didn't eat breakfast. That's how I cut weight. So I didn't eat.
Okay.
I went and wrestled a main event in Cork and Hall against Io Shirai, and then the next day had an MMA fight, and then was sick for like 2 weeks because my body just couldn't handle it. But I remember I called Josh after the fight, and I was like, "But man, I had fun," and he was like, That's the first time I've heard you say that in I don't know how many years." So,
right.
it was.
You found that love.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't feel like people ever highlight your indie career nearly as much as it should be. I mean, you really did it essentially by the books, right? Like before you ended up moving over into WWE. But the fact that you got to wrestle Io Shirai, I mean, I didn't realize that you had been trained by Mercedes Martinez. Like just for you guys all to wind up there together, like that must have been a really cool moment for all of you guys.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure, because obviously Josh with his connections, and then also like being friends with Ronda, I could have simply made a phone call probably, but I know that especially in wrestling, when it's like we have each other's life in our hands, it's more important to get the respect there than like Twitter to love me. So it was really important to me that no matter what people thought about why I got signed or if I got signed or whatever, I wanted the people at least in the back to know, like, I did this. I showed up to help set up the ring at like indie shows where 30 people showed up. I did the living in Japan and eating 7-Eleven food,
which is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, it's really good, really good.
Noodle sandwiches. Who doesn't want that?
Oh man, those meat buns. I would eat 1,000 of those.
It's the best. I love that. What about conversations with Vince? Which I know is like a whole can of worms, but like, isn't it so scary?
Yeah.
I never got used to it.
He's never been. You come with this image that he's this like unhinged, crazy guy, but he's always so nice and like critiques me really well. I don't know. He's never been the way you imagine. That you build up this monster in your mind so much.
100%. You hear all these stories like then that becomes bigger than like what the conversation actually is. But like that would always rattle around in my head. I always got so like stressed. I'm like, oh God, this is going to be the time that he's going to go off on me.
I think it's like when I first started wrestling on Raw, he gave me a talk that was like, look, you have something different to offer. You have a unique look. And the thing you have to start learning now that you're on Raw is that your work rate is shown on pay-per-views and at NXT. So don't get so hell-bent on weekly Raw TV, because that's where we build the story for the work rate that you can do on a pay-per-view.
Right.
Okay. So this was a thing to juggle, right? So he's like, you have this thing. I don't want you to do any pro wrestling. Got it? Okay, got it. So I have this match, and it looks like I'm just like going off the map and like beating someone up. He loves it. The next week I do it again. He loves it. The next week I have a match with Natty, and I'm like, listen, Natty, who's way more experienced at this than me, obviously. I'm like, listen, Natty, Vince wrestling, and Natty's trained with me like in an MMA gym. So yeah. So I was like, listen, let's just shoot around a little bit and then we'll get to what we need to get to. We do it. He hates it. We go in the back and he's like, well, it looked like you guys were just fighting each other. And I was like,
yeah.
Okay. So he makes us do it again. This is when we were doing like the stuff at the PC, and we were recording some episodes and doing some live. So he goes and makes us do it right away again. And I'm just flabbergasted. I'm still new up there, so I don't know how stuff is. I'm like, and Natty's like, I got you. We'll do this. So we go and we do like a match that she basically calls to me. And it's a normal match, you know. We go in the back and he loves it. And I'm so confused at this point. I'm like, man, we did like headlock, takeover, drop down, leapfrog. I don't understand. And so I go and I sit outside Vince's office for a long time because I'm like,
just the worst feeling.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's and you know, you're asking the guys outside, like, is he in a good mood today? Okay.
Oh my
like,
God.
okay, like it. Yeah. So I don't wanna. I don't know. It's nerve wracking. He's the boss.
It is.
And anytime you go to the principal's office, it's scary, right?
Yeah.
So I go in there, and I don't even know. I don't even know what I wanted out of it. I think it was just to get it off of my chest. But I was like, man, listen, I know I have something that no one else has. I know I can bring a certain legitimacy to this that no other female has. I don't know how to figure it out week to week yet. Just give me a chance. And I was like, you'll never have to worry about me being in shape. If you want me to go out there and wrestle the same match 100 times, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. Just give me time. Like, I'm just letting you know, I'm aware I don't have it. Just give me time. I'll make you money. And he was like, can't wait. And it was like, I think it was finally when I started working with like Sasha and Bailey, where I think in the ring I stopped trying so hard to impress like Vince and just started feeling comfortable in my stuff. And it was finally where it started being like, okay, that's it. Right. And going in the back and being like, is that more? And he's like, you're getting it. Yeah. So it has been this big learning curve. But I think feeling that comfort in what I am and not necessarily, and this is leaving out a whole bunch of like Randy Orton being like, don't worry about the fans saying it's boring. Like they like just giving advice, and AJ Styles giving advice, like all these guys. But it has been a hard balance, and it's something I'm constantly struggling. Like, I have this old school style, but also I can't necessarily do it the way they did it back then because it's wrestling today. Right. So it's been this, it's still a juggling process, you know?
Yeah. And like you said, so you're doing something new. So there's really not a lot of people for you to bounce it off of.
Mm-hmm. And I think realizing too, when I was at the PC, the coaches are great. But I think sometimes it was realizing they don't necessarily know what they want to see out of me. They know what they don't want to see. Sure. So it wasn't like the critiques I would get sometimes weren't, hey, you should do this way. It was, that doesn't look like what you would do in a fight. And they don't necessarily know what it would look like, but they know it when they see it. You know what I mean? So it was, I don't know, just realizing certain things. And you're going to ask 100 different vets and 100 different producers and coaches, and they're going to give you 100 different answers on the way something should look. And it's just being able to like kind of Bruce Lee your way through pro wrestling as well, you know, pick what sticks for you and throw out the rest.
Obviously at some point, whenever this happens, we have to have you versus Ronda, because that would be a shining moment. What the hell is she doing? Let's go, lady. Come
well,
on.
you know what's funny? So after the Ultimate Fighter, Ron and I have talked about this. After the Ultimate Fighter, I was at a stage in my life where like the world fell apart. I went through this stupid breakup, and I like broke my ankle and all this stuff. So Ronda had flown me out to California to be like, you need to get out here. The water is healing. Let's go. And I went out there, and she really helped me. And I remember we were sitting around. It was like, I can't remember what the reason was, but we were celebrating something. I can't really remember what it is, but it's this big like Armenian meal, right? And these guys like bring out all these platters, and we're drinking and making toasts. And so I remember toasting like, Ronda, I am going to give you the fight that you deserve to thank you for what you did for me in my life. And I remember the coaches at the time were like, that's the best toast ever. And it's funny because Ronda and I have talked about how that at the time you think that meant MMA, but it might mean this, you know?
Yeah.
So that's a WrestleMania. We'll see. It has to, you know, WrestleMania is coming up, so it's probably not this one per se, but it would have to be a spot where, because we're a team first and foremost. So it'd have to be something like as a teammate, and this is a very like amateur wrestling mindset, as a teammate, you're never going to deny a teammate a shot if they earn it.
Yeah.
So it would have to be one of these things. And
ooh, that would be juicy. I mean, I know everyone's waiting for like 4 horsewomen versus 4 horsewomen, but like you and Ronda would be like, oh my God, it would be so amazing. I would love to see that. You mentioned going through a breakup, and I feel like you, obviously by design, are very private about your private life.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a relationship where someone is like really trying to force you to go public with it?
Yeah. I've had relationships where the other person is like counting social media posts that they've posted versus mine, and it's so lame. I hate that so much. I want to keep my private life private just because we're so in the public that like I want to have some piece of me that's still mine, and I feel like that part is important. And that's nothing against like it's not like I'm going to deny something.
Yeah.
But I'm not like, I don't know, waving these flags and using it in to in storylines or get anywhere. Like it's nothing like that. And again, nothing against that. That's just for me the thing I've decided. Like I want to keep these certain things. I even had a time where I didn't want to post about my dog because I was like, the dog is the thing I love the most. I'm gonna keep that private. And then we do this like silhouette challenge TikTok, and she goes viral, and I'm like, well, that's.
I missed that. I have to look that up. That's amazing. I get your point though, because I mean, even for John and I, we it took a while for us to ever be like fully public about what we were doing, but he had similar fears where he was like, this is just our thing. And then once it became public, and then we even got married, like we got married in our backyard at 2:00 in the morning from a guy off of Yelp. So it was
awesome.
Like low key, just the two of us. But once people found out at work, it was like, oh, we've got to make a storyline about this. And people are, being like, your wife did this. And then like, I'm slapping the Miz. And it did turn into like a bit of a storyline. And John was like groaning the entire time, just like, oh, this is what I didn't want. Yeah. And I couldn't see it through that lens at first. Cause I was like, I don't know. We both still work here. And like, I don't know. I didn't think it was a big deal, but I get it in like hindsight of like, yeah, it's your own private thing. And all of a sudden everyone gets their sticky little fingers on it.
Yeah. And just like, I don't know, putting it like just the way, I mean, we kind of talked about like cancel culture, right? And it's not that cancel culture is something I'd be scared of in my private life or anything, but it's just like when you only know bits and pieces, people paint this entire story out of just bits and pieces that they see. And I just, if I'm going to have something, it's going to be authentically that. And I don't want people to like build this artificial view of something. So it's just better for now to be private. I don't know. I don't really have a good like justification, because to be honest, I wouldn't like be like, I'm not doing a storyline or something if that came up. But I just like, I don't know, that not everything that every public person has is their entire life. And that's just the part I keep, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I hear that loud and clear. And one other thing I would love to talk to you about that really lured me in here.
It's not the whiskey?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's whiskey and it's roller derby.
Yeah.
I am obsessed with roller derby. And I feel like I really missed my opportunity because I feel like I could have thrived
you would have been
in the roller
awesome.
derby world. How did you get into this? Did you coach a team and you were on a team? Like, how did this all happen?
So I had a friend who's roller derby's a lot like pro wrestling in that they have like roller derby names. So
like Alice in Chains?
Yes. So I had a friend whose derby name is Queen Eliza-bitch, and she was in Sioux Falls, my hometown. She was like the star of the team. So I go to this roller derby one day, and I see her like scoring, like getting a grand slam, which means she got through the whole pack, which means she scored a whole bunch of points. And she's going around, and as she's catching up to the pack, she's like playing air guitar to the crowd and like doing all this stuff. And I was like, this is pro wrestling. Like, I get what this is. So a friend, we had a mutual friend, like we didn't know each other, and I worked out like a maniac because I was a fighter. and she worked out like a maniac just because she's a maniac. And so he put us in touch and was like, you guys should work out together. And I'm thinking like, this girl ain't gonna be able to do my fighter workouts. It's crazy. But she hung in there, and then she does crazy stuff like marathons, and I hate running. So I was like, all right, I'll do a half marathon if you train to do this. So we started working out together. And then what started happening is she was getting in better shape. And so other girls from the team wanted to come out. So I just by default became, I was doing some personal training at the time. So I became like the roller derby personal trainer, where I would just train them if they were on the team. And then I started like going to games, and then I was like, they were calling me, because I'm coached by Josh, right? So I'm like a hard ass too, kind of. So they'd bring me back into the locker room at halftime to like give a talk to the team, and like they'd bring me in. And then I started going to practices, because I didn't think it was fair that I'm like giving these talks and trying to coach these girls if I didn't know what they were going through and what was going on. So I started doing that. So I really got into like roller derby. Used to be pro wrestling back in the day, and now it's fighting as a legitimate sport, and it is, and these girls are athletes and they train. And I think I really identified with that, as far as like MMA being that way. MMA had this stigma alongside pro wrestling, so they had to really fight to show that it was a different thing, and the way that they're athletes and they train. So I don't know, I got really into it. And that's another subculture. I think like the reason I could never fully be on a roller derby team is because the skill they're best at is the after party, and I just cannot hang with them. I'd like to tout this like beer and whiskey and stuff, but I cannot hang with these derby girls. I go to an after party.
It's like very rock and roll too. It's like,
yeah,
there's like a real punk. Rock and roll. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, it's cool, and they're very I don't know. I really think there's certain sports, fighting and pro wrestling are two of them, that are meant to be seen live. And I think roller derby is one as well. And the world has to go back to normal, because those sports are meant to be digested live. You just cannot get the same experience.
I was really looking into it for a while, because I was like, I need something to do. And there's the Sin City Roller Girls.
The Sin City Roller, and their logo's a spade. Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, so I was like, oh, I should go. I had been like contacting them, and they had like their open tryouts. But my issue is I bought some, but I'm not great on roller skates, but I can roller blade. But roller skates are a whole different ballgame.
So you would be surprised at the like level of zero that a lot of these girls that get into roller derby come from.
Yeah, I guess
like
that's
you
true.
should, if you want to do it. What's the worst that happens? You don't make it and you don't like it, then
I'm making the team. Let me tell you, if I go there, I'm making the goddamn team
for sure. And I think you'd love just it's very like anything.
Cool.
Yeah, the culture of it's cool. They're a very tight knit group. I really wanted. So when I was in LA, I wanted to get involved with Sin City Rollers because their logo was a spade. I just didn't have time. That's something.
Imagine that's where we met.
Oh man, see, it was meant to be, because no matter what our paths were, we would have ran into each other. Yeah. Yeah.
One other thing before I let you go, I know I've been chatting your ear off, but this was another thing that also interested me a lot, going back to our best friendship, is you're into magic. I fucking love magic.
Yeah.
How did you get into this? What like made this all start?
So I was a nerdy kid, and so I was really into like ventriloquism and magic. They kind of went hand in hand back then. And I started doing like card tricks. So my thing has always been close-up magic. I love, because if I could, it's a very like pro wrestling psychology. If I could actually do this, if I could actually change this card into something, I would be like, get over here. I wouldn't be like, everyone stand behind this line. I'd be like, everyone gather around, look at this stuff. And so I really love about close-up magic, that it's, kind of David Blaine popularized it. But that very like, everyone gather around, look at this stuff. And so when I was doing magic tricks to Josh, I told you, and I got this Queen of Spades nickname from doing this trick involving the Queen of Spades. And I started learning about card cardistry flares, which is the stuff that looks like magic that isn't, like the weird ways to cut the deck and shuffle fancy stuff that looks cool, because I was like, you know what's cool? I could do all this stuff on camera and people would just think I'm good at magic. I don't need to learn tricks anymore. I just need to learn that cool stuff. And I'm terrible
just the
at
sleight of hand shit.
Yeah, I'm not good at the cardistry part. I could do card tricks. And I'm not like Nigel. Like
Nigel is very good. Nigel
amazing.
McGuinness is who we're talking about, but he is very good.
Yeah, he's way better than me. But it's something I don't know. It's a neat little party trick that, like, when you're at someone's house, they're like, "Oh, Shayna," and they have a deck of cards, and I can like do one. You know what I mean? So I
got very into it for a while. Like, I never perfected anything, but I was like fascinated by it. I was reading Steve Martin's book, Born Standing Up, and he grew up being a magician. Like, that's how he started everything with his like comedy and all that. But he had this book, The Big Book of Magic, and it's like this giant like textbook. So I was like, I'm gonna buy that. Again, guys, don't drink and go on the internet. That's what
old
happens.
School magic books are so hard to digest too.
Oh my God. I was like, I'm gonna get through this. And I was like, it was him and oh gosh, there was another like famous comedian that was like really into that magic book. And I was like, well, I want to be like these guys. I'm gonna get on that. But then moving out to Vegas, and there's like the Houdini shops, and like we went and saw David Blaine. I love that stuff so much. But again, I mean, everything is pro wrestling, as they say.
Yes, everything. The people I live with laugh because I'll go on YouTube Black Holes watching like Penn and Teller fool us and all this stuff on YouTube, and it's like everything is pro wrestling. There's the first two things I would tell someone that's into pro wrestling to study outside of pro wrestling is Kiss, the rock band, and Magic, stage magic.
Wait, why Kiss? Why Kiss?
If you go to a live Kiss concert, which I think they did their farewell tour already, you would
I've seen Kiss. I've been there.
Yeah, I've been to a few Kiss. Kiss was the first show my dad took me to when I was in like 8th grade or something. Yeah. But everything's pro wrestling. Everything is pro wrestling.
Yeah, it all comes back to it, as we've learned. I mean, literally any like side thing we've talked about has been like, oh, because of this with wrestling, it all connects. 100%. Well, Shayna, thank you so much for finally joining me here on my show. It was so much fun getting to hang out with you. Long live the honor and pride of the whiskey, not in the drawer, but in the locker room.
Yes.
I'll see you down the line, girl.
We'll toast one to you after the next, after WrestleMania this year. Everyone's got to watch and know that the locker room is rocking after WrestleMania this year.
Always. Oh my God, it's the best.
Listen, we should do this again. We only tipped the iceberg here.
I know. There's so much stuff to get into. I'm like, oh my God, there was this I want to talk about, and this and this.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Love to do a Shayna part 2, 100. Yeah. Or when the world opens up, we can do it in person, and that would be 10 times better.
Yes.
Hell yes. All right, have a good one, buddy.
All right.